Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is the first recap or review of the new Hulu series Mike, which chronicles the life of Mike Tyson. We are looking at episodes 1 and 2, which will be airing tomorrow on Hulu, August 25th. Now, before we begin that, we have to give a quick disclaimer. I was lucky enough to be able to get the entire series from Hulu to review. However, because Mike Tyson himself has came out and, pretty much trashed the whole series, claiming it's like a slave master's view of his life and he doesn't endorse it whatsoever, the executive producers came out and basically gave this statement. They said that this is a look at Mike Tyson's life from the childhood traumas until his ascent as heavyweight champion. They did say that they never wanted to portray Mike as a hero or a villain. They're looking to examine everything from, the contradictions and have everybody decide for themselves how they feel. And they wanted to make sure they took a very strong look at the cultural and social issues that occurred in Mike's life that kind of shaped his worldview. That includes race, that includes rape, that includes dehumanization of Black bodies and women's bodies. These are their own words. Also, poverty, prison reform, uh, quote unquote toxic masculinity, addiction, and the wealth divide. So that is a lot of heavy information to try and disseminate through the life of Mike Tyson, but this is what they're attempting to do. So when you're evaluating this, and the way I'm going to be evaluating this is seeing if they succeeded in covering all these topics that they're trying to aim to do. So let's get right into it. Episodes 1 and 2. The first episode is entitled Thief, and it's basically showing the beginning of Mike Tyson's life. Now, funny enough, it starts off with a view of Tyson Holyfield 2, which is the famous fight where Holyfield was bit in his ear by Mike Tyson. But you only see a few seconds of that, and it takes you right out of it. Mike is actually the narrator in the story, and he's narrating his entire life to us, the audience. So that's kind of the motif as you're going to see throughout the series. And as we're looking at a few scenes of the Tyson Holyfield fight and we're seeing the bite, it freezes and he says, forget all that. We're not going to start there. We need to start all the way back to my past. So then you get a nice little rewind, version of going back through time, back to Mike's beginnings in 1974 as a young kid. And you see, even from the beginning, why his life was so hard. You see him getting bullied. You see the words that they use to describe him, all the people in his life, including his mother, Lorna. She's saying that, you're a piece of shit, you're not going to be anything, you're a petty thief. His teachers, when he's evaluated as far as his learning, the teacher flat out says, or the guidance counselor, an older white male, he's retarded. So you need to be able to start preparing your life for that, just flat. Nothing as far as we can do this to try and speed up his learning, or he needs to be in this class because he's a little behind, but we can still help him. It's just no, he's retarded. And these sweeping generalizations that a young child is hearing, you can see how it shaped his life, how, just shaped his worldview. Because even if you hear Tyson talk now, he still will sometimes go into that, well, I'm a piece of shit, I'm a nigga, I'm not anything, I'm not worth anything. And you can see the beginnings of that in the way all the authority figures and the figures that are supposed to care for him, how they talk about him. So he's not respected by his peers, everybody's bullying him. And then we have the one moment that he's talked about numerous times as far as how his life changed and how he became a fighter. He mentions a guy by name, Gary Flowers. I don't know if we've ever seen Gary Flowers or if he's ever given his side of the story, but essentially this person, a peer of Tyson's, when he was playing with the pigeons and all that stuff, bullied him and ripped the head off of one of his beloved pigeons. And that snapped something in Mike. So at that point, he refused to be a victim going forward. He jumped on Gary immediately and beat him to a bloody pulp. And after that point, Mike was respected in his Brownsville neighborhood. He got his own little gang together called the Running Road Crew. He was doing home invasions at about 10 years old. So you're seeing all of this, and this is happening quick because this series, I didn't know. I'm assuming every episode was going to be about an hour. These are only half-hour episodes. So this is moving, everything is moving very quickly. It almost feels like kind of like a movie, not a movie, a series. Like, you know, like a movie, 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 like a what am I trying to say? Music video type style, which can kind of help and kind of hurt because when they try and touch on heavy topics like his relationship with his mother, I feel like it moves a little too quickly and it takes away from the emotional punch. Give you a quick example. We see a scene of hers where the first thing we see is her spitting out blood and spitting out a tooth. And the reason she's doing that is because her lover, her living boyfriend, punched her in the mouth. And Mike is sitting there watching that on the couch, seeing her spit out this blood and everything. And she says to him, just relax, stay out of the way. We're not going to let anyone bully us or take advantage of us. So what she does is she puts him off to the side and she takes a scalding hot pan of food and throws it in this guy's face. And then they immediately start fighting back and forth again. And Mike mentioned something in the narration about observing them. They would get into these knockdown, drag out fights where they would beat each other and then after that they're having sex. And I feel like that was something that was very pivotal, when you're talking about Mike Tyson, that whole idea of pleasure and pain and force when it comes to relationships. I'm not sure if they're going to tie that later on to the rape accusation and the conviction, but I think that's a big opportunity to do that. But because it happened so quickly in the scene, I think it takes away from kind of that emotional punch that they may have been going for. So moving on from that, we see Tyson, he gets in a reformatory. We find out that his mother was a prison matron. So we see how she has that fear of prison for him, but she doesn't know how to quite lovingly pull him out of that. She's very hard on him as far as verbally abusive and even physically abusive, and it's not working with him. It's actually making him a harder individual. And as they say, the first people that you fall in love with from the opposite sex are really your parents. Your father is your model of what a man is supposed to be. Your mother is going to be a model of what a woman is supposed to be. And so subconsciously, when you finally come of age and go out in the dating world, you're going to be looking at those characteristics in your partner, whether you're going to want them or you might want the complete opposite depending on how you were raised. But that was only his only model of what a woman was. We see that throughout these first two episodes. There's no other, we don't see much of his sister, which I think was kind of a mistake because it almost made it seem like his mom was the only representation of a woman or a female that was in his life. And they mention his sister. He does mention his sister and how she didn't get in trouble. So I feel we should have seen more of them, in these first two episodes to kind of show that contrast between the direction he went down and the direction that they went down. Because they do mention that his brother became a surgeon. So his brother was on a complete straight and narrow, unlike him. I also wanted to mention with the narration, they flip back and forth between times. So you might remember the famous one-man show that Tyson put on a couple of years ago. That's for the future. So this is basically him talking, and they're using that show to show him reflecting on his past and talking about his past. So that was a good touch. The actor Rhodes, he doesn't look exactly like Mike Tyson, and no one really could, but he does a phenomenal job with the voice and with the accent and with the lisp. That pulls you in immediately. He sounds almost exactly like Tyson to me. So that was perfect. As far as the look, when he is in his prime fighting 80s form, Rhodes does, look very much like Tyson. He has the body build and everything, which is perfect. As far as the older version of Mike Tyson who's doing the monologues with the tattoo, face tattoo and the shaved head, a little bit harder to pull off. Doesn't quite look like him, but you can kind of get over it very quickly because his acting ability is very, very strong in this. I think he did a phenomenal job so far in these two episodes. And I also want to give credit to the younger kids. There's two or I think three different versions of Tyson. You had the little kid version that we see initially in 1974. Once you get to 1975 in the early 80s, you have the teenage version of Tyson that comes under Cus D'Amato. And then you have the prime Tyson from the 80s, Trevante arose, and then we also had the old version, which is played by him as well in the current time. So all these versions of Tyson did a really good job, especially the teenage version, who when he becomes under Cus's tutelage, we get to see that contrast and the parental role. Now, his mother, Lorna, there's a very strong scene where Cus comes to her and basically says, let me take him out of here. Let me take care of him. I can keep him out of the streets. And she can kind of see right through him. She can kind of see the dollar, not just really the dollar signs in his eyes, but really just the attempt to return to glory. Because as we reflect, Cus was the trainer of the previous youngest heavyweight champion of all time, and Floyd Patterson. And also Jose Torres was another famous fighter that he trained. But at this point in his life, in his older twilight years, he doesn't have any champions and he doesn't have really any high profile in the boxing industry anymore. So Mike Tyson represents his last chance at glory. And Lorna can see right through that. She's seen so many people of wealth and of means, use Black people at their whim. So she's not really going for it. She says, will you be there for him if he can no longer fight? And Cus can't give her an answer. And that lack of an answer lets you know everything about that. And she says to him, you better keep winning because once you stop winning, they're going to dispose of you. That's the only thing that you're worth to them. So that was a very strong scene. And with Cus himself, it's not that simple because when you're watching him with Tyson, yes, it's not quote unquote unconditional love because he sees the talent and he wants to utilize that talent. But we see later on after Tyson's mother succumbs to cancer that there is love there, that he does care for him and he even adopts him. So it's not as simple as your kind of straightforward white savior role. There is nuance there, but you can't call it unconditional love either. There is love with conditions, which is the reason why he's even in Tyson's life is because he sees the talent. And this here is also where I think we see Tyson's ascent, and we also see what kind of doomed him to the path that we were on now. Because Cus was so focused on making him heavyweight champion, he didn't give him any life skills. We find out later on in episode 2, which is entitled Monster. And the reason it's entitled Monster is because that's what Cus wanted him to be. He actually took him to a hypnotist at one point to kind of drill in his mind that no one can beat you. You intimidate everybody, no crying. You need to embrace your villainy. Even when Jimmy Jacobs and Bill Clayton came in later on, and for those who don't know who aren't into boxing like that, those are the two figures that were kind of used to help market Tyson, which is who Cus D'Amato, his trainer, brought in. Those two guys initially they wanted to model him after like Bill Cosby because we're talking about the 80s. We remember how big Bill used to be back then. They wanted him to kind of be cookie cutter, not intimidating, your kind of clean cut champion. And Cus was like, hell no. I want people to fear him when he walks in the room. I want the fans to fear him, but still love him. And I want the fighters that he faced to be shaking in their boots. So no, we're not going with no Cosby clothes. I want him to be, and this is his words. He says, F safe. I want him to be a scourge. I want him to be a monster. And that is what he drilled in his head. He didn't drill in him the life skills of this is how you need to talk to women as you're growing up. This is how you court a woman that you might be interested in. This is how you interact with, adults at a certain age, even though you're a teenager. This is how you act or conduct yourself when you're upset. How to tap into your emotions in a healthy way. These are all healthy things. But no, he wasn't like that. When Tyson lost the Junior Olympics and he was crying, he told him flat out, no more crying. Be a man, take it like a man. So he's repressing all these emotions while he's also ignoring the trauma that Tyson went through, growing up in a life of crime, losing his mother to cancer, and never really having the opportunity to make amends with her because he has so much resentment for her, based on the way she raised him, the way she talked with him. A big part of his redemption for him was going to be becoming heavyweight champion and showing her that I can be somebody. And that opportunity was robbed from him because she passed away while he was a teenager. And then Cus, on top of that, he passes away before Tyson is even 20 years old. And one thing I didn't know, even though being a boxing reporter that, or at least forgot about, was that after Cus died, Tyson was fighting not even a week after that. So he never had time to really process his feelings and everything that he was going through. It was really just you're a machine, you're Iron Mike, you need to be back in the ring destroying people to still make Cus proud, which he did. The second episode, Monster, ends with Tyson knocking out Trevor Bervick for his first world title win, WBC title. And the very cool thing about that, for those of you who have watched the actual fight, you'll remember when Tyson knocked him down with a hook. It knocked him down three times, basically. Berbick tried to get up three times and fell back down each and every time. He couldn't get up from that one punch. And they do a really cool thing of showing Berbick's face. And it's almost like a drunken stupor. And it shows him keep trying to get up and keep falling back down. It's a very cool effect of what Berbick is probably going through with his mind, in his mind, trying to get back up. So the first two episodes, really fast paced, only 30 minutes for each and every one. So you can kind of breeze through these very quickly. I feel that that's a good thing as far as for people who are trying to get an intro into Tyson, but I do feel it's a detriment for those people who are looking at that deeper meaning and deeper social commentary because they have to move on for each and every scene so quickly. And I mean, and like I talked about before, that opening letter that I went through, as far as them talking about wanting to cover race and rape and dehumanization of Black bodies and prison reform. That's a lot of heavy stuff that you really can't dig into like you need to with 30-minute episodes. Now we do have 8 episodes for the season, so we'll see how it goes over the course of, 8 episodes. But for now, just for the first two, it's moving a little too quickly to really tackle those the way that they should. Even the scene, which I'd be interested to hear how you guys feel about it. I mentioned the Gary Flowers scene where Tyson confronts his first bully. They use DMX's X Going to Give It to You as background music for that moment. So that even ties into that whole almost making it like a trendy, slick music video type of style, which I feel is a very strong contrast and takes away from some of those heavy topics like addiction and wealth divide, everything that you're trying to touch on. But so far, it's definitely worth watching. Make sure you tune in tomorrow, August 25th. I'd love to hear what you guys think. I know if you're on this page, you probably have some interest in boxing and definitely in TV film. So I'd love to hear your takes on it. As far as the actual fight footage, I mentioned that we got just a snippet of Tyson Holyfield. We did get a jump to 1988. So we in the first episode, so we did get to see the full one round Michael Spinks knockout, which I think was done really well. I mentioned the Trevor Berbick fight. We've seen some of his earlier training, a little bit of his loss at the Junior Olympics, which pushed him to go pro a lot earlier. Oh, and one thing I forgot to touch on, which, they mentioned the dehumanization of Black bodies. I wanted to look even further into a subtopic, which they touched on very quickly, which is with young boys, particularly young Black boys, having to grow up quicker because they're perceived as older and being perceived as a threat, even when they're young, even when they're still teenagers. And a good example of that is Cus D'Amato. He wanted Tyson to get some underground training, right? We even see that now with certain fighters. They go over to Mexico as young fighters. I think even Devin Haney did this to fight in Mexico, fight grown men, even as teenagers to get experience. In this realm, they're called smokers, underground fights. So Cus had Tyson at 14 going to these underground fights to compete and hone his skills. Now, when he sent them there, they didn't believe he was 14 years old. They was like, come on now, because you see how built he was. And that's what I'm touching on as far as young Black boys not being able to be perceived as boys and being able to perceive as having a childhood because they're looked at as adults and as a threat. They were like, no, he can't be 14. He at least has to be 18. And the trainer that Cus sent with him said, okay, lying. So yeah, he's 18 just so he can get a fight. So here he is in this environment, forced into having to be older, having to be an adult, quote unquote, and having to fight grown men, and that helped perceive his idea that I have to be the villain. I have to be older than my years to make everyone else around me proud. So in a sense, even when Tyson got taken out of that Brownsville environment, it's almost like he still didn't have a chance because he was never seen as just a complete, fully fledged, fully three-dimensional human being. For Cus, he was just, a machine that he can hone. And like you mentioned, the villain. And, once you get that drilled into your head, you don't know the difference anymore. You don't know how to turn it off. And I think that's what we're going to see more so in episodes 3, 4, and 5, which will be coming next week. I'll be making sure I drop these reviews the day before. So look for them every Wednesday, probably Wednesday morning, where we can discuss. And then you'll see the episodes themselves on that following Thursday. So I thank you for your time. Looking forward to your feedback once you get to watch these episodes. Definitely make sure you do. Let me know what you like and what you dislike. And also, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, make sure you check out my reviews every Monday on House of the Dragon, which will be posting every Monday afternoon by 4 p.m. If you like the content, please like and subscribe, and looking forward to hearing your comments. Take care.